All right. Now, if I can get this thing to come on. All this technology is kind of. All right. Verse 17 of chapter 6. Remember, we talked, chapter 6 is kind of review. Chapter 6 is one of the most controversial chapters in the Bible. And two basic interpretations. I take the more literal, you might say, the more literal interpretation of it, because I take all the Bible as, I try to take it as literally as I possibly can. Because I think the Bible is literal, and if it's not, in places it tells you so. That's the way, kind of the way I look at it. Like, for instance, in Revelation, we talked about when it says, "I seen something that looked as if it was," then that means it's subject to interpretation. But if it says this is this, then that's what it's talking about. But anyhow, we'll get into chapter 17. Excuse me, verse 17. We talked about that God had now repented that he had made man, and that he was going to destroy them from the face of the earth because of what the sin, and I believe the I don't know what the word would right be for it, but for the sin that would happen throughout all the people of the world, not only in the people, but also they had contaminated, you might say, the animal kingdom as well. That's the reason that it all had to be killed. It's very similar. I say this, and then we'll get into the verse. Very similar to the way it was when Joshua crossed the Jordan River, and they started to attack the different cities that was to clear out the cities. That God would tell him to destroy not only every man, woman, and child, but also the animals. He told them to destroy everything, and not to leave nothing alive. That's why he done it, because I believe that had happened in those cities as well. That something had gone, something had went wrong in the genome, if you will, the DNA, that required them to be destroyed. A lot of people, especially skeptics, will point this out, and they'll say, "Well, you see, now this God is supposed to be love, and look at him, what he's doing, killing all these men and women." Well, it's because of that. He's trying to protect the actual people and get rid of the hybrids, if you will. Okay, that's a better word than I can think. Not a real good word, but it's better than nothing. But anyhow, verse 17. "And behold, even I, do bring a flood of water upon the earth." He's talking to Moses here. "And to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under the heavens, and everything that is in the earth shall die." And I believe that's the reason why. It's because everything had been contaminated. Satan had tried his best to spread his seed, maybe, or because he knew that the curse was that his seed would destroy the seed of the woman. And so I believe that Satan was in full form trying to create, you might say, his one that would condemn them all, to put them all to death. And anyhow, but it says, but continuing on, "And thou shalt come into the ark, and thou, thy sons, and thy wives, and thy son, and thy sons' wives with thee." In other words, he said, your family, basically, is what he's saying. Your sons and their wives and your wife will come into the. Don't mention if they had any children here. It's possible they could have, but we don't know that. Excuse me. Allergies is killing me. But anyhow, the sons and wives all were in the ark, and they were. They were. You remember we read about Noah and he was perfect in his generations. I believe Noah probably was the only one that was completely free of any contaminated bloodline, you might say, without a better way to explain it. And also, not only that, but the sin that was taking place on the face of the earth. That's what repented God. And after, in verse 19, and of everything that living, all flesh, everything is to be killed. But it said in verse 19, and of every living thing of all flesh, two of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee. Then they shall be male and female. Now, I believe that the Lord, some people think that he had to set traps and go out and catch them. I believe the Lord brought them there. I personally believe the Lord just brought, because he knew maybe the animals that still had a clean bloodline. It hadn't been contaminated with all this goings on that was going on with them at that time. I believe God brought them there to the ark when it was ready. It says, and continues on, it says, of the fowls after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing of the earth after his kind. Two of every sort shall come into thee to keep them alive. And it could be, and I tend to believe it was at this time, all the animal kingdom very possibly could have been vegetarian as well. They ate vegetables and fruit and whatever, because remember, it was so different, and that's the reason man could live so much longer and so forth. But I believe that anyhow, to feed them, they didn't have to have animals to feed other animals. In other words, they didn't have to have sheep to throw into the lines so the lines would have something to eat. They didn't do that, because I believe these animals all were vegetarian type animals, kind of like a bear. A bear today can eat meat, but they also eat vegetables. And it's very possible that most all of the animals were that. In fact, I believe all of the animals were that way. So the only thing that Noah would have to have would be fruit and vegetables and stuff that the animals would eat. That made it a whole lot better than having to feed the lions animals, you know. Also, another thing could be that I've heard some people say, well, they could have, excuse me, God could have put them in a kind of a hibernated state as well when they were on the ark. Bears hibernate. It could be that God put that into those animals too, that they hibernated on the ark, very much so. But anyhow, let's continue on. The two of every sort shall come into thee to keep them alive, and take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them. So you see, that's what this is talking about. He's talking about gathering whatever they eat, whatever they, the fruit, vegetables, whatever it was that these animals and the people ate at this time onto the ark, so they would have food to eat. And thus Noah, according to all of God's, thus did Noah, according to all that God commanded him, so did he. And so Noah did it just as he was asked to do. Now, do y'all have any questions so far?
Don't you think the animals you talked about, how to separate them, but don't you think God was in control and he had them animals to come?
That's right.
And the others didn't understand or nothing and didn't go along with them. They went on their way.
Yeah, that's what I believe entirely. It's strange why even today, how God controls, you know, the birds when they migrate from one place to the other. They can go fly thousands of miles one way and come back and nest in the same place that they were born. God can do it, and He can do it. And so I believe that's God working in that scenario. And so you see, He could have easily put that into the animals to have them to come to the ark and get on and so I believe that Noah didn't have to go out and catch them. He didn't have to go set traps or nothing like that. God sent the animals to the ark that He wanted to get on the ark. That's plain and simple. And it could be, I don't know. Of course, I'm one that believes that very possibly there were large lizards, and what you want to call them dinosaurs, at this time. God could have put them on there. I don't know, and it could have been that's where the end of some of the dinosaurs took place. Because I believe that before Noah, there was dinosaurs on the earth. And I think that's where we get the tale and the not tale. Well, it is tales days gone by, people slaying dragons and so forth. I think that's where that come from. But anyhow, we won't get into that too much. But I do believe that these people that say that the dinosaurs lived millions and millions of years ago, I like to tell a little story, and it's not. From what I understand, I believe, I can't remember if it was Paul Harvey, but years ago I heard this story, and it was told as it really took place. This little boy and girl had their cat died, and so they were really sad. But they had a little funeral for the cat, and they went out and buried the cat. A few years later, the little boy, he decided, he's going to dig it up, see what it looked like, dig his cat up. He dug his cat back up, and it wasn't nothing but bones, So he thought he'd take it to the school and say, "Look what I found." He took it to school, and the teacher and all was just amazed at what they found. They brought in scientists and all. They thought it was a kitten of a saber-toothed tiger. It had lived millions and millions of years ago, and was a cat that had been dead 3 years. The people don't know. They're just guessing. They just got this theory, and they pile one thing upon another to make this theory about evolution and all this. And it ain't nothing but a theory. If you talk about them closely, they'll admit it is a theory. Theory don't mean fact. It don't. And anyhow, I think that's a nice little story, and from what I understand, it was true that they brought in whoever, the scientist or whatever, that looked at the paleontologist or whatever you call them, and they said it was a kitten of a saber-toothed tiger. Anyhow, let's continue on.
Think about it. They had been grasshoppers and bees.
Yeah, all that.
All the insects on there.
All that was on there.
Ants.
Yeah. They all crawled up on the.
They all was put here for a purpose.
Yeah.
Because we need the bees to
Some of them's
pollinate.
a pest, but but I guess they are. One
Buzzards.
feeds the other, and
The only thing that didn't get on the ark, I think, is the fish. I don't think
Well,
they
they had plenty to eat
They had
after
plenty.
he covered them up with water, so
Yeah.
they had stuff that.
and they had plenty of water too.
You know, there's not a horse with a horn. You think the unicorn missed the boat?
He must have. But that story may have come from some of that stuff was going on before that. That could very well have been. But anyhow, take thou of all, basically is gather all the food, and I believe that was be vegetables and fruit and whatever else that they needed, and store it for them on the ark, and then thus Noah did according to all the Lord God commanded, so he did. Now that's a extremely large statement. for God just said, well, he done it all. He done all that I said to do, basically. But to build that ark, and some of y'all have seen it, but even if you haven't seen it, you can imagine how big it would be. It was what I thought of when we were in it. I thought it was like us being in a mall. I mean, it was as big as a mall. You had 3 stories, and of course a lot of them was little shops that you could look at and so forth is in there as well.
Good task for a 600-year-old man, but
Huh?
it's a pretty good task for a
600, that's right.
man.
That's right. And like Dennis said, maybe he hired some of the giants to help him. Maybe. It could have been, really. There's a lot of that giants that is not. Well, I won't go into it. Don't sound good about them. I'll tell a couple. They were cannibalistic. They eat humans. That's what they would do. A lot of bad stuff was going on. All right, let's go to chapter 7. If y'all got some more questions about God telling them about building the ark. He says, and the Lord said unto Noah, come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen For thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. And again, I think he's repeating that Noah was a righteous man, but also I believe he's saying in this generation that he was his bloodline was pure human blood. It wasn't a messed up version. And he said, so that was just one verse that covered the complete building. That previous verse that we read, just one verse said, well, you built an ark, you put all the animals in it, now you're ready to get in it. It's all that in this one verse. But anyhow, he says,
One thing I noticed is he said, "You alone have I seen." So God
Yeah.
is watching everybody.
Yeah.
His eyes rove to and fro over the earth
Yeah.
to show himself strong to those whose heart is fully his.
That's-
So he saw and he is still seeing all of us.
Right.
We do.
That's absolutely right. I agree with you. He knew that, in fact, he said it. He said, in thy generation, you alone.
Have I seen?
Right. But anyhow, continuing on, he says, and to get into the ark, but you know, well, we'll see here in a minute that they don't shut the door. God shuts the door. Of every clean beast. Now this is something else. This is another side to the animals. He said, of every clean beast, thou shalt take of thee by sevens, the male and of his female, and of beasts that are not clean by two, male and female. Now, a while ago we read it was just two, male and female, but here God is specifically separating and saying make seven of the clean animals. Now this is really telling us a lot. It tells us first of all that man knew what a clean animal was before Moses wrote about it. When he wrote when he got the Ten Commandments and the law, that man already knew what a clean animal was, because God told him take seven clean animals. Now, what's a clean animal? Well, we talked about this a little bit last week, or not a week or two ago. What's a clean animal? For an animal, it's basically it's two different things that designate. They have cloven hoof, which means they have a hoof that's separated, got a crack in it, and the other thing is that it chews the cud. I used to amaze me when I was growing up on Grandpa's farm, seeing the cows, they'd lay down and chew the cud all the time. But other ones like sheep and goats and all that chew the cud. They're clean animals. But if you've got some, and it's interesting, you've got some that halfway. You've got the pig. It has a cloven hoof, but it don't chew the cud, so it's not clean. And well, I think there's some others, but I'm sure that's one of them. And I think that pig is one of the things that the Jews were not allowed to touch, not allowed to have anything to do with. Possibly at that time had to do with things that would get into meat. I can't remember the right word. Parasites would get into the meat, and they didn't know that, and it would make them sick. That's one of the reasons why God, I believe, didn't. But
don't you think that really speaking of a clean animal would be like a clean person? What I'm trying to say is thoroughbred. It's not nothing crossbred.
right,
Bred and stuff like that.
yeah,
Wouldn't it be? I'm looking at that. Instead of clean animal.
Maybe going back to the bloodline.
yeah.
That's
Well, it
not
could
what
We
be.
ignore today.
It could be.
Bloodline.
Yeah,
It's the clean, clear blood, clean,
yeah,
that produced that animal, or just like it does a human.
yeah. But what they're talking about here though is clean animals that you could eat later on. That you wasn't allowed to eat any unclean animal. But I do agree that it means they were clean bloodline, that they weren't mixed up with some of the
To
other.
produce later on, what I was looking at, they wanted a clean blooded animal,
Yeah,
like he created.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he's talking about here. But it's interesting that he wanted seven of them. I guess it would be 7 pairs, 7 male and 7 female.
I think it cleared that up on men and 7, I
Yeah.
think.
One of the things that you will realize, if I'm not mistaken, I might be mistaken, but I don't think so, that after the flood, about the first thing that Noah does is he offers a sacrifice when he gets off the ark. He's got to have some animals to offer a sacrifice, and it'd have to be a clean animal. So that's the reason why he had to take more clean animals than unclean animals, and that's one of the big reasons.
One of the things we've studied over the years about, good food, what's healthy for you.
Mm-hmm.
The cow has 4 stomachs. If they chew the cud, whatever they eat, it takes 24 hours for that to become either milk or meat on their bones.
Uh-huh.
But a pig, what it eats within 4 hours, that is meat on its bones. So the parasites and all these things can still be in the meat, and they will eat snakes. They will eat anything, any garbage.
Yes, the pigs will eat just about anything.
So, whatever it eats becomes flesh, and then we're consuming it. I mean, we've made it a delicacy, but it's really not healthy for us.
Yeah, I remember my grandpa when they would slop the hogs. They would put everything in the slop. They put bacon in this. If they had leftover bacon or something that was bad, they put it in there. Yeah, grandma's dishwater. I started saying grandma's dishwater. She'd pour that in there. Then he'd get a couple, and he'd go down to the barn and he'd get a couple scoops of bran and put in there.
Give them a little taste of honey in it, and
Put it in there.
put a little bit of corn.
And they'd eat, and Grandpa every once in a while, he would feed them some coal.
Yeah, clean.
That cleans them out, supposedly. But you could throw them a piece of coal down there and they'd eat that thing up in a heartbeat. They love the coal. Well, you know what coal is, don't you? It's trees and this all that has been compressed.
Up to vegetation
Yeah.
that turned to gold. I mean, that's cold, yeah.
It's not a rock. It's vegetation, but but the animals would eat it.
All that precious fuel we got in the ground come from the vegetation that was covered up after the flood.
Right. Because it was so much richer then
Yeah.
than it is now. But anyhow, God says you can only to get 2 by 2 of dirty animals, if you will, unclean animals, and 7 by 7 clean animals to put on the ark. And I think it's because he had to have the animals, or had to have them for sacrifices and so forth. Verse 2, and for every clean beast thou shalt, well, we already read verse 2. Verse 3, of the fowls also of the air, by 7, the male and the female, to keep them alive upon the face of the earth. Now the fowls of the air, there are clean and unclean animals, birds as well. But he don't differentiate. He says take 7 of all of them. It looks like here, of the birds. For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made will I destroy off the face of the earth. God is going to destroy everything, not what they say on these programs that you might see on television about. I seen one the other day said it was a flood of the Black Sea. The Black Sea flooded because no, it wasn't the Black Sea. The whole earth flooded. And anyhow, it says, and Noah did according. And I do know, I ain't no archaeologist or whatever, but I do know that on the tops of many mountains, on the very tops of them, you can find fossils of clams. I think it's clams. Fossils of clams, but they're fossilized closed. They're not fossilized open. They're closed. In other words, they were put in there and in the mud, covered them up quickly before they died. It had to be quick. If they would have been a slow, over millions and millions of years, they wouldn't have been closed. They would have been open. But they find them on the tops of mountains. Now, how did they get there? How did they get there on the tops of some of the high mountains? An animal that belongs in the sea. It just happened. Of course, if you've ever seen any of the things about, they talk, one of the big things they've got, the lie tellers. I can't think of the right word. That tells that tells about it took millions of years for the I can't think this morning, folks. Out in Colorado, the huge Grand Canyon. I think I could think of the Grand Canyon. How it came about. They said it come about over millions of years. Slow erosion washed it out over millions of years, and that's the reason why you see the different things that this year and this season, and then this season is a different season and all that. And they go by the way that things are layered out, saying that this is what do they call it? Basically a timeline. I guess it's not what they call it, but over millions of years, and different animals are fossilized in different areas of it. And that's what proves the evolution, that there's a long old creation. Well, they don't. There is another canyon out west. It's not been there very long. It was created by Mount St. Helens. Remember those when Mount St. Helens exploded? Some water had gathered up in the upper area, and finally started washing its way out, and it washed out that canyon. It's a large canyon too. They washed it out when that dam, you might say, broke, and it looks just like today. It looks just like the Grand Canyon, or no, not as big, of course, but it's got the same features of the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon was formed by water that was up above it, and there was an earthen dam up. You know how water settles? Some of it'll settle in a puddle over here and over there. Well, a huge puddle settled up above the Grand Canyon, and the earthen dam broke sometime after the flood, when the water was receding, and it washed out the Grand Canyon, and made it then. The reason I say it because during the flood, all that sediment that settled during the flood created those layers. And that's the reason you have different animals and different layers of that sediment, because it washed it, because it had killed them when God sent the flood. They had died, and then they settled down in different areas as that sediment from the flood settled in the bottom. And then the Grand Canyon, then the earthen dam broke and washed it all out and formed the Grand Canyon.
One thing I was noticing here, I believe what you said about the animals being vegetarians.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think the reason he had them to bring 7 of the fowl of the air, do you think that the birds were meat eaters because they cleansed the earth? They had to be lots of animals and things that would die along the years, and the vultures would come in and clean up the land.
Yeah.
And then after the flood, they would be dead bodies and things like that those vultures would have to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So
Very
I
possible.
think it's that would be the reason he took 7 of the birds.
Yeah.
Because of cleaning up the land. They would be the meat eaters.
Yeah. Well, some birds are not meat eaters, but a lot of them are.
Just saying vultures.
Yeah, like vultures and hawks and so forth. All those are unclean, by the way. Vultures and hawks. I can't remember. One thing is not cloven feet, but webbed feet. I can't remember. We might see it in here a little bit later about cleaning unclean birds and so forth. But you're not supposed to eat hawks, and you're not supposed to eat meat-eating birds of any kind. But yeah, I agree with you. It's very possible that he wanted to have some app to clean up, because that's what much of the life is here today. It's if you stop thinking, you might think a buzzard is ugly, but you might appreciate it after a few years if we didn't have any, because they clean up. They're the God's birds He sent to keep the earth clean.
Clean up and they mess up.
Huh?
They clean up and also they mess up. So look at our
Oh yeah.
Look at our people in the church.
Is it doing it on
That's
this
from
view?
the bus.
Is it doing it on this steeple too?
Oh, look at it.
They used to roost on the other one, I
The
know.
droppings has just ruined the paint on the steeple.
Well, we'll have to talk to the Lord about that.
It is, it's the truth.
See if He can send us some birds that don't do that up here. I agree. They can make a mess.
They
I don't wanna, I've heard that if you get around their nest, they will throw up in their nest. I've heard that, to keep people from getting their eggs. I've heard that. But anyhow, that's beside the point.
I had two birds that come back every year. Used to, we planted a big garden. The nest right in the middle of the garden. Every year, the same bird come back.
That's because
Yes.
it was in his DNA to where to come back.
There's some long legs on it. I don't know what.
Was it a big bird or a little bird?
I don't know what the bird. The big one.
Was it a big one? Was it big or
No,
small?
they're big.
Just a little bird. Yeah, they always come back.
Yeah,
I don't think-
I wouldn't plan up to have their eggs there, you know, they did try, if you get up right next to the next nest, the fly won't use that, you try to, the more you try to chase them, it goes somewhere.
Yeah, try to get you away from their nest. Yeah, yeah, I remember my cousin tried to climb up in a nest climb up a tree and get to a nest one time. He come down out of that tree fast. That bird was, I won't go in, the bird was giving him a hard time. All right, verse 5 says, and we got time. Noah did according unto all that the Lord commanded him. And Noah was 600 years old when the flood of the waters was upon the earth. So yeah, you're right, 600 years old there, Harry. You done it all. Can't remember how long it took for him to build it. I think it's in here somewhere, but anyhow, it says, and Noah went in, and his sons and his wife, and his sons and wives with him, unto the ark, because of the waters of the flood. Of the clean beast, and of the beasts that are not clean, and of the fowls, and everything that creepeth upon the earth, there went in two and two into Noah into the ark, the male and the female, as God had commanded Noah. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth, and in the sixth, and it's just they're telling the date here now, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day whereon all the fountains of the great deep broke up, and the windows of heaven were opened up, and the rain was upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. I'm stopping there, backing up actually in verse 11, looking at that date. You know what that date is?
February 17th.
Huh?
February 17th.
Well, you might think it was February, but that's not the Jewish calendar. The Jewish calendar is different. It would be the second month, would be actually is Passover, is when it would be. The first month, actually no, it wouldn't be. Nisan is the first month of the Jewish calendar, and that's when Passover is. You can have a second Passover on the second month. It could be that this is it says in the 17th day of the month, that it was, the Jews have a weird calendar, but some of them consider the first month to be the seventh month. I don't know how they figure that exactly, but it could be that it was a fall feast. But I believe it started when God was going to start the feast, because if it was the 17th day of the month, Passover begins on the 14th day of the month, and continues on. But this is the 600th day or the second month, which I can't remember the name of the second month in Hebrew, but it would be in the spring. It'd be in the spring during that time. But it says here the fountains of the great of the deep broke up. Actually, if you stop and think about it, though, when God put them all in the ark, they went into the ark, and it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth. Wait a minute. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth.
Skylar, right sevens are happening in the seventh chapter.
Yeah. You're right. Not, and I don't think that's a coincidence
I
either.
don't think so either.
Even though they signed chapters and verses later on.
Right.
Well, didn't they say, someone said like before the flood, it didn't rain? You know, that it was like
Oh, it's-
the water covering over the earth.
Yeah.
And dew and stuff fell, but it didn't like rain.
Yeah. There was according to what we read back earlier in the creation, there's a canopy of water around the earth. And
See,
that collapsed.
come down.
That collapsed.
That's what,
And then we're going to see here, we've seen also when we was in that the fountains of the deep were broke up. In other words, I believe that the earth broke up and water come up from under the earth as well, not just from the sky, but also from under the earth. And that's where it all came from. There's enough water on the face of the earth to completely cover it, no problem.
That's what I think. I think the earth, the high areas was cut down to where the oceans met,
Yeah,
covered the entire earth.
yeah, and when
Didn't it say about the peaks, high peaks, somewhere or another, I read it somewhere, where they was cut down, destroyed down?
yeah. I don't know about it. You're probably right, but I can't remember where.
I think I read it somewhere.
But you see the earth, if the land, not the water, but if the land was a round ball, then the water would cover it up. The water would be outside, it would cover the whole earth. Today. But because the earth is not a round, the dirt, the ground is not a round ball, it's shaped differently. And so some of it sticks up out of the water, which is where we're at today, and some of it is still under the water. And the water is what makes the earth round. It's not the earth, it's the water.
They also say that if you, like on the globe, all of the continents will fit together.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you can, it's like a puzzle, they will fit together.
Yeah, but they're shaped very similar. Yeah. Just that it's because the earth is not round. It's got high places and low places and so forth, and the water fills in the low places. But there is definitely enough water on the face of the earth today to cover it up if the earth was round. But anyhow, on that, I believe that here on verse 11, well, I think we probably ought to quit. But verse 11, we're talking about. I believe that we're going to see this because as we go through it, the flood, it sets dates. It gives dates, and there's 40 days here and so forth. You remember Jesus when he was resurrected? How many days was it till he ascended to heaven? 40 days. Just like it's 40 days and 40 nights of the flood. There's a lot of similarities between the calendar of the flood and what took place with Jesus and what's going on in the Jewish calendar. Well, I'll tell you what, let's stop at verse 11. Unless somebody's got anything they'd like to add. There we go. All right, well, let's all stand. Good to have you all today. Let's have a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the creator and maker of this universe, we just thank you again for the many, many blessings that you have given us, for the opportunity that you have blessed us with to be here this morning, and Father, for the opportunity that you continue to give us to worship you and your Son, Father, and fellowship with each other here today in the fellowship of your Spirit. Again, remember all those on our prayer list, that you will bless, guard, and keep them in everything that is said and done, and we'll praise your name for it. I pray now a blessing over everyone here. Yavarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ye'er Adonai panav elecha v'yokanecha. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasim lecha shalom. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you his shalom, his peace. As always, we pray for the peace of Jerusalem and Shem Yeshua. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.